Commander Marcus Walker stood at the observation deck of his remote outpost on Helios 7, watching the binary stars paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. After 15 years of military service and countless battles defending human colonies, he had chosen this solitary posting at the edge of known space. The quiet suited him, or so he told himself. The outpost's warning system suddenly flared to life, breaking his contemplation. An unregistered ship was approaching, its design unlike anything in human databases. Marcus's hand instinctively moved to his pulse rifle, muscle memory from years of combat taking over. The vessel descended with impossible grace, its silver hull reflecting the dual sunsets like liquid mercury. As the ship touched down, Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He recognized those markings. They belonged to the Luminari, a species known for their advanced diplomacy and strict isolation protocols. The ship's hatch opened with a soft hiss, releasing a cloud of crystalline vapor. Through the mist emerged a figure that stopped Marcus's heart. Her skin held the characteristic opalescent sheen of the Luminari, shifting between deep blue and violet in the fading light. But it was her eyes, those impossible silver eyes, that made his world tilt on its axis. "Celera," he whispered, lowering his weapon. She stood before him, exactly as beautiful as she had been 5 years ago, when their paths had crossed during the peace negotiations that ended the frontier wars. Her diplomatic robes caught the wind, rippling like liquid starlight. "Hello, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality unique to her species. "It's been a long time." Marcus struggled to maintain his composure. Their brief time together during the negotiations had changed everything, and nothing. A human military commander and a Luminari diplomatic emissary. The politics alone had made any relationship impossible, not to mention the biological differences between their species. "You shouldn't be here," he managed. "This sector is restricted?" A small smile played at her lips. "I have clearance from both our governments. Finding you wasn't easy, Marcus. You chose your exile well." "It's not exile," he countered. "It's a posting. A posting where no one would look for you." Her silver eyes held his. "Where you wouldn't have to face what happened between us." Marcus turned away, unable to hold her gaze. "That was 5 years ago. We both agreed it was impossible. And yet here I am." Her footsteps were whisper-soft as she approached. "Because there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you before you disappeared." He could feel her presence behind him, that familiar energy that seemed to hum in the air around all Luminari, but stronger with her. Always stronger with her. "Marcus," she said softly, "I want you to meet someone." He turned, and his world shifted again. Standing in the ship's doorway was a child, no more than 4 years old. Her skin held the opalescent sheen of the Luminari, but her eyes were human dark, exactly like his own. "This is Arya," Celera said, her voice trembling slightly. "Our daughter." Marcus stared at the impossible child before him, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Human Luminari hybrids were theoretically impossible, their genetic structures too different. And yet. "How?" he whispered. "The same way you and I were possible when everyone said we weren't." Celera moved to stand beside their daughter, who watched him with curious, intelligent eyes. "She is a miracle. And she deserves to know her father." Marcus felt the careful walls he'd built around his heart begin to crumble. He took a step forward, then another, drawn by a force stronger than gravity. The child, Arya, tilted her head, studying him with an expression so like her mother's it made his chest ache. "Hello, Arya," he said softly, kneeling to meet her eyes. She smiled then, and Marcus saw his own smile reflected back at him. "Hello, father," she replied, her voice carrying both human warmth and Luminari melody. As the binary sun set behind them, casting long shadows across Helios 7's surface, Marcus Walker realized his solitary posting had just become considerably less solitary. And for the first time in 5 years, he felt truly alive. The outpost's common room felt smaller with 3 people in it. Marcus watched as Arya explored the space with careful curiosity, her small hands trailing over the worn furniture. She moved with her mother's grace but examined things with an intensity he recognized from his own childhood. "She has your analytical mind," Celera said softly, as if reading his thoughts. She sat across from him at the metal table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of earth tea. "Always questioning, always wanting to understand how things work. Why didn't you tell me?" Marcus asked, finally voicing the question that had been burning in his throat since their arrival. 5 years, Celera. 5 years of thinking we had made the right choice by walking away. Celera's silver eyes clouded, a sign of deep emotion among her people. "I didn't know until after you left. And when I discovered what was happening." She paused, gathering her thoughts. The Luminary High Council was already concerned about our relationship. A hybrid child? It would have caused chaos. "So you handled it alone?" Marcus couldn't keep the hurt from his voice. "Not entirely alone. There were those who helped, doctors who understood that what we had created wasn't an aberration, but an evolution." She watched as Arya discovered his old star charts, her small fingers tracing constellations. "But yes, I kept it secret. Until now." "What changed?" Celera's expression hardened. "Politics. The conservative faction within the council is gaining power. They want to end all contact with humans, return to our old isolation. When I learned of their plans..." She met his eyes. "I couldn't let them erase her heritage. She deserves to know both sides of who she is." Marcus absorbed this, his military mind already calculating implications. "And now that you're here, the council will know where you've gone." "Let them come," Celera said with quiet determination. "I've spent 5 years protecting our daughter. I won't stop now." Arya approached their table, holding one of Marcus's old combat medals. "You're a warrior," she said, her voice carrying that unique blend of human and luminary tones. "Like in Mother's stories." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "You told her about me?" "Every night," Celera smiled. "Though I called you the brave human who danced among stars. It became her favorite bedtime story." Arya climbed onto the chair beside him, her movements carrying the natural grace of her mother's people. "Will you teach me about the stars, Father? Mother says you know them all by heart." Marcus looked at this miracle child, this impossible blend of 2 worlds, and felt something shift in his soul. 5 years of chosen solitude crumbled in the face of her innocent question. "Of course," he said softly. "Though I think you might teach me a few things too." A warning chime from Celera's communication device interrupted the moment. Her expression tightened as she read the message. "They're moving faster than I anticipated. The council has dispatched a diplomatic vessel to escort us home." "How long?" Marcus was already moving, military training taking over. 3 days, perhaps 4. Celera stood, her diplomatic robes shimmering. "I know I've disrupted your life, Marcus. If you want us to leave dash." "No." The force of his response surprised even him. He looked at Arya, who watched them both with those intelligent dark eyes. "I've missed enough. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Celera's relief was visible in the way her skin shifted colors, deepening to a rich indigo. "The council won't give up easily. They believe purity of bloodlines is sacred. Then they'll learn what happens when they threaten a Marine's family." Marcus moved to the outpost's security console, fingers flying over the controls. "This posting isn't just some forgotten outpost, Celera. It's a former military installation. We have options. We're not asking you to start a war, Celera said softly. Marcus turned to her, seeing both the diplomat who had captured his heart and the mother who had protected their child alone for 5 years. No, he agreed. But I'm done running from what matters. The council wants to talk politics? Fine. Let's show them what humanity and Luminari can create together. He glanced at Arya, who had returned to studying the star charts with focused fascination. In her, he saw the future, not just for them, but for both their species. Some things were worth fighting for. 3 days, he said, already forming plans. Let's make them count. Celera moved closer, her presence bringing that familiar electric hum to the air around them. I've missed your determination, she whispered. Arya isn't the only one who needed her father. I never stopped needing you too. As night fell over Helios 7, Marcus Walker began preparing for a battle unlike any he'd fought before, not with weapons, but with truth. And this time, he had everything to lose, and everything to gain. Dawn broke over Helios 7's horizon in ribbons of crimson and gold. Marcus stood in the outpost's communication center, reviewing encrypted messages from old military contacts. Beside him, Arya sat cross-legged on the floor, assembling and disassembling a simple quantum puzzle he'd given her. Her small fingers moved with surprising precision, her face set in concentrated determination. She has your focus, Celera said, entering the room. She'd traded her diplomatic robes for more practical attire, though she still moved with characteristic Luminari grace. When she sets her mind to something, nothing can distract her. The puzzle was meant to keep her occupied for hours, Marcus replied, watching their daughter with wonder. She solved it in 20 minutes. And now she's trying to understand how it works. Celera smiled. She does this with everything. Takes it apart, puts it back together, always wanting to know the why behind things. A soft chime from the communications console interrupted them. Marcus's expression hardened as he read the incoming message. The council's ship has increased speed. They'll be here in 2 days, not 3. They're afraid, Celera said quietly. Not just of what Arya represents, but of the change she could inspire. There are others like us, Marcus. Other humans and Luminari who found each other despite the barriers. They're watching what happens here. Marcus turned to her, seeing the weight of responsibility in her silver eyes. You planned this, didn't you? Coming here wasn't just about Arya meeting me. It was always about Arya, Celera countered, but then softened. But yes, the timing was deliberate. The Council's push for isolation needs to be challenged, and what better challenge than proof that our species can create something beautiful together? You're using our daughter as a political statement? There was an edge to his voice. I'm using the truth as a weapon, Celera replied firmly. Every moment they deny her existence, deny the possibility of harmony between our peoples, they strengthen the xenophobic faction. I won't let her grow up ashamed of who she is. Their discussion was interrupted by Arya's excited voice. Father, look. She held up the reassembled puzzle, but something was different. The quantum patterns had been rearranged, creating new, more complex configurations. Marcus knelt beside her, examining her work. This is incredible. You didn't just solve it, you improved it. The original pattern was inefficient, Arya explained, her voice carrying that unique blend of human directness and Luminari melody. This way makes more sense. Celera joined them on the floor, her expression soft. Do you understand now, Marcus? She's not just our daughter. She's proof that our differences can create something greater than the sum of its parts. Marcus watched as Arya began explaining her improvements, her small hands gesturing with enthusiasm. In her face, he saw both his own features and Celera's, blended perfectly. But it was more than physical, her mind seemed to work in ways that were neither purely human nor purely Luminari, but something new and remarkable. The Council's ship, he said finally, what's their likely approach? They'll try diplomacy first, Celera replied, slipping easily into her political analyst role. Offer rewards for compliance, remind me of my duties to our people. When that fails, they'll attempt to take us by force, claiming it's for Arya's own protection. They'll find that difficult. Marcus moved to the security console, entering a series of commands. The outpost's defensive systems hummed to life, long-dormant shields shimming into existence. This facility was designed to withstand military-grade attacks. But we're not looking for a fight. What are you planning? Marcus smiled, and for the first time in years, felt the thrill of purpose in his veins. You said others are watching. Let's give them something to see. The Council wants to talk about purity and isolation. We'll show them what the future could be. He turned to Arya, who had already begun modifying another puzzle. How would you like to help your mother and me change the universe? Arya looked up, her dark eyes bright with intelligence. By being myself? Exactly, Celera whispered, pulling their daughter close. By being exactly who you are. As the binary suns climbed higher in the alien sky, Marcus Walker began preparing for a confrontation that would challenge not just the Luminary Council, but the prejudices of both their species. In his daughter's eyes, he saw the promise of a future where the stars themselves weren't barriers, but bridges. And this time, he would not walk away. The Luminary diplomatic vessel emerged from hyperspace like a shard of crystal catching starlight. Marcus watched it approach on the outpost's main viewer, his expression grim. Beside him, Celera stood tall, her skin shifting through shades of deep blue that betrayed her tension. High Counselor Thyren, she said, recognizing the ship's signature. They sent him personally. Your mentor? Marcus remembered the name from their time during the peace negotiations. The man who taught me everything about diplomacy, Celera's voice carried a note of sadness. And the one who warned me most strongly about falling in love with a human. Arya sat at the secondary console, watching the approaching ship with fascination. Over the past 2 days, she had absorbed everything Marcus taught her about the outpost systems with remarkable speed. Now her small fingers danced across the controls, monitoring shield frequencies with intuitive ease. They're hailing us, she announced, her voice steady. Marcus shared a look with Celera before nodding. Let's hear what they have to say. The view screen flickered, revealing the austere face of High Counselor Thyren. His skin held the pale blue sheen of age, and his silver eyes narrowed at the sight of them standing together. Emissary Celera, his voice carried the full weight of Luminary authority. You have violated multiple protocols. Return to the ship immediately, and we will discuss your indiscretions privately. With respect, High Counselor, Celera replied, her diplomatic training evident in every word, I am exactly where I need to be. This human has no claim. Thyren began, but Marcus cut him off. Commander Marcus Walker, former Earth Defense Force. He stepped forward. And I have every claim. That's my daughter you're trying to take. Thyren's expression hardened. The child is an aberration. A violation of natural law. She will be properly cared for, but must be studied, understood. Her name is Arya, Celera interrupted, her voice sharp. And she's not an aberration. She's the future. As if on cue, Arya stood, moving to stand between her parents. High Counselor, she said, her voice carrying both human strength and Luminary grace, I've been studying your ship's shield configurations. Did you know they're operating at only 70% efficiency? I could help you improve them. Thyren's shock was visible even through the view screen. He stared at the child who addressed him with such confidence, such precise understanding of advanced technology. Impossible, he whispered. No, Marcus said firmly. Not impossible. Revolutionary. He placed a hand on Arya's shoulder. You're so focused on maintaining what you think is pure that you can't see what's possible. The Council's laws dash. Laws can change, Celera stepped forward. You taught me that, Viren. You taught me that diplomacy is about building bridges, not walls. Look at her. Really look. She's everything we could become. Arya tilted her head, studying the High Counselor with those remarkable dark eyes. Your ship's energy signature is beautiful, she said simply. But it could sing even better with a few adjustments. Shall I show you? Something shifted in Thyron's expression, a crack in the diplomatic mask. He looked from Arya to Celera, then to Marcus, seeing not an aberration, but a family. The Council will never accept this, he said, but his voice had lost its edge of certainty. Then the Council will be left behind, Celera replied. Because we're not the only ones. There are others like us, waiting, watching. Every moment you deny the possibility of harmony between our peoples, you push us closer to true division. Marcus stepped forward, his military bearing evident. You have a choice, High Counselor. You can try to take my daughter by force, and I promise you, that will not end well. Or you can listen to what she has to teach us. All of us. A long moment of silence stretched between them. Finally, Viren spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition, and the possibility of change. Perhaps, he said slowly, we should talk. As the tension in the room eased slightly, Marcus felt Arya's small hand slip into his. He looked down at his daughter, this miraculous bridge between worlds, and saw the future in her smile. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not as humans or Luminari, but as family. And in the vast expanse of space, that was the most powerful force of all. 1 year later, the observation deck of Helios 7 had changed. Where once there was only stark military efficiency, now there were signs of family life, star charts marked with a child's careful annotations, diplomatic documents sharing space with quantum puzzles, and windows that had been modified to capture the binary sunsets in all their glory. Marcus stood at his familiar spot, watching the stars, but he was no longer alone. Arya sat cross-legged on the deck beside him, working on what had once been a simple defense system calculation pad. In her hands, it had become something more, a bridge between human and Luminari technology that had caught the attention of scientists from both worlds. Father, she called, her dark eyes bright with excitement, I think I've solved it. The resonance frequency that was causing interference in the communication arrays, it wasn't a problem, it was an opportunity. Marcus knelt beside her, examining her work. At 5 years old, his daughter's understanding of quantum mechanics already surpassed many adult engineers. Show me, he encouraged. As Arya explained her discovery, Celera entered the room. She wore the formal robes of her position, no longer just a diplomatic emissary, but the newly appointed ambassador of harmony, a role created in the wake of what historians were already calling the Helios Accord. The council meeting went well, she announced, her silver eyes bright. 3 more hybrid families have come forward. They're establishing a cultural exchange center on Proxima Station. And the conservative faction? Marcus asked, though he could guess from her smile. Losing influence by the day. It's harder to preach isolation when your best scientists are begging to study the improvements Arya made to their shield systems. She moved to join them, her hand finding Marcus's. Viren sends his regards, by the way. He's become quite the advocate for change. Marcus smiled, remembering the gruff High Counselor's transformation over the past year. Amazing what can happen when people open their minds to possibilities. The possibilities were always there, Arya said without looking up from her work. Someone just needed to prove they were real. The simple wisdom in her words made both parents pause. Their daughter had become more than just their child, she was living proof that differences could create strength, that love could bridge the gaps between stars and species. The outpost's communication system chimed softly. Ambassador, the automated voice announced, "The first group of exchange students has arrived." Celera squeezed Marcus's hand. What had begun as a refuge had transformed into something greater, a center for learning, for breaking down barriers, for building new kinds of families. Young humans and Luminari would come here to study together, to understand that the universe was wide enough for all kinds of love. "Ready to meet your new students?" Marcus asked Arya, who had already begun gathering her projects. "I've prepared presentations on cross-species quantum harmonics," she replied seriously, then broke into a smile that was purely her own, neither human nor Luminari, but wonderfully unique. "And Father helped me plan some games too." As they made their way to the main hall, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 5 years of solitude shattered by an unexpected return, a daughter he never knew he had, and a love he thought he'd lost forever. Now, watching Celera and Arya walk ahead of him, their forms silhouetted against the starlit corridor, he knew he'd found something far greater than peace. He'd found purpose. The binary suns of Helios 7 painted the sky in familiar shades of amber and gold, but the light that filled the outpost came from within, from a family that dared to defy conventions, from a child who bridged worlds, and from a love that proved stronger than the vast distances between stars. As new voices filled the corridors, human and Luminari children arriving to learn together, Marcus Walker finally understood. Sometimes the greatest adventures weren't found in battle or in the cold reaches of space, but in the simple courage to open your heart to impossible possibilities. And in the end, that made all the difference in the universe.